and hope you all are doing good. So today I'm making a video to know how we can do the automation of the GraphQL queries, right? As you might be aware about the GraphQL already. So you can see like a GraphQL is like an alternative to your REST APIs. So today we'll be seeing how we can automate the GraphQL using the Node.js. We can also do this with any of the language binding. So let's keep the scope of this particular video limited to the automation using the Node.js. So what you need to do, you have to just go to your browser and search for the npm package known as GraphQL request. So we'll be using this GraphQL request library to automate the GraphQL queries. So on the web, I found like one of like a GraphQL API which is like an open source. So we'll be making use of this to automate the entire flow. So let's start without wasting any time. So you can see right on this particular page, you will be seeing a query of launches past, sorry, right? So what it will do, it will just give you the past 10 rocket missions for us. Okay, so if you hit on that, you will see right, it will give the data of the last 10 launches past. So let's do one thing. Not let's not to go with a very detailed one query. So let's try to remove some of the stuff from here, right? So what's the beauty of the GraphQL is like you can whatever the data you want from the server, right? You can just query for that. So you can see previously I have this particular data that I want as a part of my response, but in certain cases what I need, right? I don't want this particular data from the server, so I can remove this data from the query and get the data accordingly. Okay, so let's see that as well. So I will be removing this stuff from here, right? And let's see how it will go. Right, you will be seeing here, it will be showing you the 10 result exactly because the limited, it is like a, what you can say, a query parameter, which is like limit of 10. It will return you only the 10 records. So you can see this JSON object will have only the 10 records inside it. So if you just change the limit to 2, it will definitely give you only the result for 2 launches past. So you can see it here, right? So let's try to create another queries. Okay, with the launch, say with the ID. Let's say I want the launch with ID 1 and want the mission ID on this part. I don't want the ID in the response. I want the launch here and I want the link. So let's see. You see, you will be able to get the data. So you can see with the GraphQL, right, whatever the data we want as a part of a response, we can just query that data instead of just getting the entire data, which was in the case of the REST API, right? So now, as you can see the data right here, ID is equal to 1. We can also parameterize this data, okay? So it's not like that you have to hard code it every time, right? Because in the real scenarios, while writing the automation script, we'll be getting this data from what you can say from the Excel sheet or from the JSON or for the YAML file. So this test data should be externalized for us, right? So we cannot hard code the data as of in our test script. So I have written like 2 or 3 queries for that. So let's try to run that first. So I will tell you, right? So what you can see is this ID, whatever you are saying, right? This is like the data type inside the GraphQL. So there are the certain data type. If you want to learn more about this, you can just search on the web around the GraphQL documentation. You will get pretty much what I can say, pretty much good idea on this data types as well. So what you can see here, I'm just writing a query to get the launch details. Launch details previously, if you see, right, it was getting an scalar type of ID, which I was putting a value 1, but at this point you could see, right, I have parameterized the data here. So this ID will be coming from the variable. So you can see on the bottom side we have something known as query variable. So we can pass this query variable, and if I say ID as say 2, and if I search the result, you will get the data accordingly. Yeah. So if you just say 1, you will get the output as 1. Yeah. So yeah, this is how you can write the queries, right? But I would say the scope for this particular video is more on the automation aspect of doing this. So let's switch to our Visual Studio Code and see how we can automate this entire process of doing this. So for that, you have to go to the Visual Studio Code, just create one empty folder and inside open the Visual Studio Code inside that folder. Now what you need to do, first of all, if people are coming from the Node.js background or JavaScript testing framework side, they will know, right? First of all, just like in the Java, we have something like for dependency management as a Maven or Gradle, right? Similarly, in the Node.js, we have something known as package.json to install the dependency for a particular project, right? So I can say npm init -y. It will create a package.json for me, right? So you can see it has like certain parameters, the name, version, description, and the script. Now what I can do after that, I can install the dependency for the Node.js. For that, I will switch to my web and I will copy this particular npm add. So it will include the two dependencies here, GraphQL request and GraphQL. So let's say npm I -d. I have used -d to save the dependencies local to this project. You can also do this by doing -save -dev, but nowadays people are preferring to use the -d instead of just going with the -save -dev part. Okay, so now what we will do, we'll create one source folder inside it. Now let's create one test folder inside it, and let's create a file with the name main.js. Okay, so let's create one async function first. Async function, say get what we are getting here, get launch. So let's say get data. Yeah, you can name it accordingly the way you want. Okay, now let's switch to that. So for that, we have to import certain, what you can say, imports. So what happened? Okay, let's import it. Say const require. So these two, I think we'll just import this GraphQL client. That would be good to go. Okay, so you can see these two are coming from the GraphQL package that we have already installed. Now let's create a function. With the name get data. Shall we create as async? So instead of just going with the dot, then it will be easy to handle the promise using async await. Now let's go to the let's take the endpoint from here. Okay, now const endpoint equal to this one. This is my endpoint which I will be hitting to get the data from the server side. Okay, now let's define a client. Now new GraphQL client. So you can see it accepts like two parameters for you. One is like URL as a string and options as an object, right? So what you can pass it here, you can pass like endpoint. Okay, and the second thing would be like suppose if your particular request is using headers, right, and those headers are common, what you can say, across the request that you are going to send, right? So suppose what it can be like an authorization token for me, right? It can be a bearer token, which is like JWT, right? Or there will be like another what you can say, OAuth 2.0 or OAuth, right? You can also, if a particular service is utilizing that, so you have to use the headers accordingly, right? But as of now, let's say we have like a authentication, and which is using a bearer token, which is the same for all the requests. So there is a way like we can pass the headers to the GraphQL client constructor in this way, right? But now suppose what happened, there might be the cases where headers might vary, right? So there is another approach of doing that. Instead of passing it here, right, what we can do, we can create a header object, right, like this, and say I'm saying authorization again, say it is accepting some an authorization, say bearer token with something, and it's a content type, cool. Now after that, what will happen, we can send a request. How would you send a request? If I say client, right, it has like a method request. So you can see it accepts like 3 parameters now. One is like a document request document, which will be a GraphQL query, which we'll be writing now. Okay, so suppose as of now I have some GraphQL query, we will be writing it, don't worry about that. Just for the meantime, assume we have like something like GraphQL query like this. Okay, so second parameter accepts variable, right? Suppose I was telling you previously, right, you cannot pass the data something like this because it will become like a hard coding, right? So the way we pass this data in the GraphQL queries in the form of the variables. Suppose I have certain variables, right, and what you can say, this is a variable, right, this ID, so you have to pass this ID, right, and the value is 1. Now what you can pass the variable here, and it can take like headers, and you can just say const, as it's a promise based library, we need to resolve it, we can resolve it directly using await, right? And then you can just console.log, say json.stringify request, say undefined, then I will just say 2. This is for like indentation, good indentation, so it will show like a very well indented data in your console. That's the reason I have used this, but nobody uses this a lot. I have seen like most of the time people will just say json.stringify, but better to use this because it will show you well indented data on the console, right? So this is a way, right, you can just pass the headers as well if you want to pass as a part of your separate request. So I told you, right, so there are 2 ways. You can either pass something like this, right, and so you can see it is showing the headers for you, right, and the second way is just you can pass like this. Okay, let's forget about the variables and headers as of now, and let's copy our query, right? So let's see whether it's working or not. Yeah, working. So let's see what I can involve. I can include the bucket name as well. Okay, yeah. So let's remove the mission ID, it is showing in an empty array, and say ships, let, if the name would be okay for me. Yep. Oh, it does not have any ship, so let's remove the ships. Launch date we can take. Yeah, so let's try to automate this one. So what we need to do, we need to use GQL, right, something like this. So this is like the query I have constructed. So this format, if you want to see, definitely you can see as a part of this one. So what they are using, right, the GraphQL followed by a string template sign, and you can just define your query like this, right? So let's try to run this. Say get data, right? So dot then error. If there is some error, right, in case I got some error, I can do this, right? So let's run this one. Node source test main. Oh, 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 we are getting some error. He is not defined. Oh, sorry, my bad. Happens. Right? You can see the data here, right? So you will be seeing the data something like this. So this is very easy, right, to automate a GraphQL query with the help of the GraphQL request. So yeah, that's all. Thank you guys. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to this channel. In the next session or the next video, I will be covering to automate this GraphQL queries with the help of variables. Thank you everyone.